Well, it's the great spirit of this community rising to the occasion. You know, I really think we're behind in terms of getting the personal protective gear to our medical folks. There's a big disconnect between the rank and file doctors and nurses on the ground and some of the hospital CEOs. And so as I hear the desperation in the voices of our doctors and nurses about not having enough inventory of protective gear, it's just been amazing to see this community rise. So we're here at a 3D print shop, and this 3D print shop is getting a coalition of other 3D printers to print out something like 500 masks a day with the protective gear that keeps any kind of fluids from getting to our first responders. You already saw the University Health System was one of the first to have to quarantine its doctors and nurses. There's a lot of exposure that's going on at every hospital. We need thousands of these. Bexar County serves as the hub for a 32-county region of medical professionals. We only have about 200 tests a day that through our drive-through testing. And so, you know, if there is an outbreak, and obviously, you know, in the flu season and with all of the folks starting to spread this disease and numbers going up exponentially every day, the personal protective gear for our first-line responders is incredibly important. So we're connecting and trying to get the word out for 3D makers that there is a model and a plan. The materials we can post up, and I know you'll do it as part of your story, so that people know that they can contribute to this frontline offense. And by the way, we don't have to go overseas to do it. These folks are doing this absolutely free. They're not asking for a dime, but we need donations of plastic, and we need donations of the various materials for the 3D printer.
And are you setting up some kind of GoFundMe or something like that to help with that?
So, as someone who's worked in war zones and disaster zones, I know that first responders and governments become overwhelmed in any disaster. But this is a disaster like none other that we have faced. And so I'm actually standing up the Coronavirus Volunteer Corps.org, a nonprofit NGO, to help supplement our first responders and our government, we are going to be overwhelmed in the very near future. And by the way, this is not the only round of this. In the winter, there's a great chance that we will have a second round of the coronavirus, which will be worse than what we're experiencing right now. So we can train people, we can get donations of these materials, we can get 3D makers. It's really about an asset map of our community because when, you know, let's take a hurricane, for example. When people needed boats, it was the community that rose to the occasion. It's the same thing. We have to take an asset map and be able to deploy that to the governmental authorities. We've got 32 counties that really depend on Bexar County to be strong. And we have a national infrastructure of healthcare providers who need the backup of citizens in this fight. It's a global fight.
And why is this an important cause?
Well, this is a time where leaders have to stand up. I mean, any of us, this particular disease can hit any of us, and I really feel, as someone who's statutorily in charge of the healthcare system, that we have to be on the front lines of shoring up this effort. We're turning on a dime. This is not something that we planned for, and that's becoming more and more obvious in terms of the hospital supplies and all of the response. And so now that we're playing catch up to get ahead of the disease, it's going to require the overwhelming spirit of Americans to help us with this. So in my experience as a community organizer, my experience as someone who's worked in disaster zones, I have a special experience that most elected officials do not have. I've worked in the world's worst humanitarian disaster in Sudan and Burma and all across the United States and other parts of the world. And so I'm just enlisting my training.
And how did you, I know I talked to this lady over here, who reached out to you about this, or did you just start doing the research? How did that work?
So a couple things. I started having doctors and their wives and spouses and their friends reach out to me and tell me about how poorly stocked. We had seamstresses and things that were saying we can start sewing masks together. So we started connecting the dots. And this group of 3D makers, my good friend Drew, he's a former Marine, and his friends, they all got together and said, we can do something. We don't need to make any money, and we don't want anybody to make any money off of this. We know our country needs us, and that sense of patriotism and that sense of community is inspiring to me. So We're now asking people to give us plastic for the protective gear, give us those materials in the 3D maker so that we can get as many of these made right away. We're also going to go through a sterilization process. I'm going to call upon other companies who have the UV rays, the UV lights, to help sterilize these faster. They can do it 4 days here, but there are other companies that can do it in 5 minutes. We're going to try to connect those dots with the Xenex company and things of that nature. So there's a lot of work to be done, and hopefully our good friends out in the community will help us.
And what is the timeline for stepping up to help? If people are watching the story tonight, if they want to go straight and donate or give you plastic, can they do that?
They can help deliver that plastic to our Southton Road facility for the Emergency Command Center. They'll also take them here off of Tacoma at the 3D Maker facility, and we will be able to open up more facilities, and then we'll work with the Bexar County Medical Society and the hospital systems to extract to make sure we're getting equitable distribution of these resources.
Anything else I missed? You guys have any questions?
Okay.
Can we do the volunteer corps again and just like be brief and describe what the volunteer corps does?
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming over. All right.